Hi, I'm Damien and this is Enneagram Life, and today I'm going to talk about Enneagram Type 7 and how they can act like a control freak. So, Enneagram Type 7 isn't known to be a control freak, but Enneagram Type 7, like all Enneagram types, has two internal lines of connection. So, on the diagram of the Enneagram, the actual Enneagram, when you look at the Enneagram, you see that there's a circle, and that's one continuous line. And then inside the Enneagram, there's various lines that connect different types. And these are the lines of connection, these internal lines, not the circle. So these lines of connection, every type is connected to two other types. Now, the Enneagram Type 7 is connected to the 1 via a line of connection, that's connected to Enneagram Type 5 via a line of connection. Now, they have been labeled by some people to be lines of one line being a growth line and one line being a stress line. I don't believe in the growth stress system. I believe that it's simply lines of connection. So the Enneagram Type 1, Enneagram Type 7 is connected to the 1. And so that means that, well, that displays that sometimes the Enneagram Type 7 will have the behavioral patterns of a Type 1. And that could be in a place of negativity or positivity. When the Enneagram Type 7 is in a place of negativity or positivity, it might act like the positive elements of the 1 when it's in a place of positivity. It might act like the negative elements of the 1 when it's in a place of negativity. Enneagram, and same for the Enneagram Type 5, the other Enneagram line of connection. So these are just lines of connection, and they simply mean, well, they simply display that a particular type will have behavioral characteristics of another type some of the times. And so the Enneagram Type 7 sometimes behaves like the Type 1. And one of the major ways it behaves like the Type 1 is self-righteousness. Now, self-righteousness is probably the single emotion or characteristic that best describes the Enneagram Type 1. When I think of the Enneagram Type 1, self-righteousness is what I think of. They are the self-righteous type. So that emotion of self-righteousness, the Enneagram Type 7 is often in that emotional place. And you can often see that in the Enneagram Type 7. Yeah. And I'm not using that word self-righteousness to be a negative or a positive word. I'm more describing the behavior of self-righteousness. So an Enneagram Type 7 might strongly believe in, say, some sort of ethical belief, right? And this I would describe that as self-righteous. It might be the correct thing to believe in. So in that case, it might be a positive thing. But that strong belief, you see them just, talking about that strong belief, and they would seem like an Enneagram Type 1 while doing that. Because Enneagram Type 1s are all about having this, talking about what we should and shouldn't do and what's right and wrong. And so Enneagram Type 1's known for having these strong ethical type belief systems, or political belief systems, but it's that, motivated by ethics. Yeah, I guess political is probably not as good as just plain ethical belief systems. Anyway, so this Type 7, we were on I was hired to drive this bus. Well, a van that seated 12 people. And there was about 9 people in the back, and this Enneagram Type 7 was sitting beside me, and I was driving the van. So I was the, basically the chauffeur of these 10 people. 9 in the back, the Enneagram Type 7 sitting beside me. We drive on the right side in Australia. So on the left, I had the Enneagram Type 7. he was sitting beside me, and I'm driving along, and there's 9 people in the back of the van. And I knew he was an Enneagram type 7. And he had been one of the major planners of this day and had hired me to drive this van around. And I knew him, you know, a friend of a friend. I'd seen him, we'd been to a few parties and that together. And anyway, so I'm driving this van around, and he's sitting beside me. And a lot of the time he's telling me how to drive. So this is very control freak behavior. And this is a common Enneagram type 7 characteristic. I've noticed other Enneagram type 7s that are going to be super backseat drivers telling you how to drive. It's pretty annoying. And but you know, throughout the whole day, like, and plenty of times in the past, but this day in particular, you know, he was drinking a lot. He was very loud. He was very outgoing. He was having fun, making lots of jokes, laughing a lot. Like, he'd always had these big laughing reactions to a lot of the jokes and things that people were making. And so all of that was very type 7-ish. But then he's being the control freak and telling me how to drive. Yeah, so he was doing this. I mean, that's the line of connection, right? Like, the Enneagram type 1 behavior, that's a Enneagram type 1 behavior that he was exhibiting control freakiness, not specifically telling people how to drive, though Enneagram type 1s do that. But they pretty much tell you how to do everything, but yeah, tell you how to drive. Enneagram 1s, I've noticed them telling me how to drive as well. But so that was the control freak behavior, but like, I could tell that it was driven by a form of anxiety. Or maybe I should just say anxiety. It was driven by anxiety. Enneagram 7s can have a lot of anxiety. I've noticed that within Enneagram type 7s. I mean, everybody, I believe, every human suffers anxiety at some point in time. Many points in time, in different forms and shapes and varieties. I would say Enneagram 7 has anxiety more than the average Enneagram type. And so I could tell that this was, his telling me how to drive was anxiety, and anxiety based. It was like driven by anxiety, and or emotions very similar to anxiety, which might include anxiety, but other things as well. And so I knew that, you know, anxiety is a feeling. When you have anxiety, you feel like you have to do something. You don't feel like you're very compelled with anxiety. You think you must do something, and it's very hard to stop that behavior. Often that behavior is worrying, right? Like, anxiety and worrying are very similar. So you feel like you must do something. And so I knew that, like, it was this impulsive thing that he couldn't control. Yeah, and impulsiveness is, I think, a hallmark of 8s, 9s, and 1s, the gut types of the Enneagram system. I think impulsiveness is a very good word to describe a lot of their feelings or behavior, because an impulse isn't really a feeling in the sense. Depends how you define feelings. It's an impulse, right? Like, impulse, feelings, and thoughts are kind of 3 categories that I feel can be used as ways to describe, you know, thinking types. So that would be thoughts, thinking types. People said, you know, shame types and the emotional types, and the the instinctuals, it's often called in the Enneagram system. The instinctuals. I know that David Burke, he was an Enneagram teacher from, I think, the Australian Enneagram Society. I think he used to say that they were the instinctuals. Maybe he used the word impulsive too, but I don't think he did. I think I heard him say the word instinctual. And about, you know, those types, the 7, the 8, no, the 6, sorry. The 8, the 9, and the 1. I think he was talking about how they were instinctual. And I thought about this, you know, how to describe the concept of instinctual. And I don't think I'm not saying the word is wrong, but I don't think we don't have a very good concept of how instincts actually affect our behavior. And so I prefer the word impulsive. I don't think he was using that word. I think I used that word when I was trying to, you know, react to, because he used to sort of underline that they were instinctual, I think. And I was like, well, what does that even mean? And I was like, well, I'm actually not even sure. This is a while back, but I think this was my thought process. And I was like, no, I think they're the impulsive types. Yeah. And so not the 7, but the 8, the 9, and the 1, they're impulsive. And so a lot of their behavior is motivated by a, like reaction. And so by that, you know, if you look at a cat and sometimes if something runs by it, all of a sudden it goes bam. You know, if you drag a string past the cat, boom, it'll go boom with its hand. And that's an impulse. It's not thinking, hey, there's something that I might be able to catch and eat. Boom. No, it just boom, it just automatically does it. And that's an impulse, right? So we have these impulses that drive our behavior as well. And the 7 is closer to the impulse types. Being the 8, the 9, and the 1, they're the impulse types. And so I could tell, you know, within this guy, this 7 who was driving around in the bus, in the van, I could tell that, you know, he was this impulsive guy. A lot of 7 behavior can be described as impulsive, actually. Even though I'm not saying that they're impulsive types, but they're beside the impulsive types. And yeah, so like a lot of his behavior, well, when he was in the van and he was telling me what to do, how to drive, I could tell that it was like something he didn't really have control of. He felt he had to do it. Or he had an impulse to do it and he couldn't stop it, is probably a better way to put that. Rather than say he felt he had to do it, because I'm trying to use these words technically, but I know we don't in common language use these words technically. So when I say felt he had to do it, what I mean was he had an impulse to do it, but he couldn't control that impulse because it was a strong impulse. Rather than feeling in the sense of feeling types, which would be like the 2, the 3, and the 4. He wasn't motivated by a feeling, he was motivated by this impulse. And so he had this strong impulse to tell me how to drive, and which I saw as a form of anxiety, and or at least from having felt anxiety at times in my life, it was a way that I could understand what he was feeling then. Like it was something he couldn't control, this impulse he couldn't control, that he had this impulse that he had to do this thing, and it just came out. And so that's why he was telling me how to drive, right? Like he was like, go now, go. Like that was all impulsive and he was just doing it. Yeah. And so you know, like this anxiety in him, was making him behave like that. But you can react to anxiety differently, and specifically reacting to anxiety that way, or having that form of anxiety is probably a better way to put it. Having that form of anxiety where you tell people how to drive is a different form of anxiety, or a different anxiety-like behavior to other anxiety-like behaviors. Like, for example, someone might get up really early to go to work, and they might turn up to work really early. A lot of people with anxiety do that. And that's a different form of behavior to telling people how to drive. But they can both be motivated by anxiety. So getting up really early is driven by anxiety, but it's a very different kind of behavior to telling someone how to drive. But yet they're both driven by anxiety. Checking stuff is a common form of anxiety. People, keep checking. It might be, did I lock the door? I better go back and check. That's a form of behavior motivated by anxiety, but it's not the same sort of behavior as telling people how to drive. So, so he was having a particular form of anxiety. He was telling me how to drive. He wasn't checking things. He wasn't turning up to a place really early. It was a very particular form of anxiety behavior, telling me how to drive, which was a control freak anxiety behavior. Now, I kind of use that word control freak just in common language, like the way people, like most people, if someone tells them how to drive, they're going to be like, he's a control freak. And so that's how I mean it. And, I think that a lot of the reason why people will tell you how to drive is because they don't have a problem with overriding you or superseding you. So when you supersede someone or you override someone, like that comes from an emotional place. And that's the self-righteousness. Like if you're self-righteous, that means you have a certainty about your beliefs, being self-righteous. If you super believe that you're right, like you're not even questioning it, you're not even going to think about overriding someone. You're just going to do it. You're not even going to think about superseding someone. You're just going to do it. So that comes from self-righteousness. And like I said, self-righteousness is that core emotion that the Enneagram type 1 is defined by, self-righteousness. I mean, obviously there's anger, right? That is actually the core emotion of Enneagram type 1, but it's not the emotion that defines it from the other anger types. The 7, the 8, the 9, and the 1 are all anger types. So the defining emotion, the defining core emotion is self-righteousness. That's what defines the 1, that separates it from the 8 and the 9. That's what separates 1 from the 9 and the 8. Yeah, self-righteousness. And so self-righteousness, it leads to overriding. It leads to superseding. And so this is why, or this shows, is probably a better word, this shows how the 7's anxiety is often seen as coming out in a form of control freak behavior, because they're connected to the control freak, the 1. Yeah. So when I am around 7s, typically I do see the self-righteous behavior, which is usually comes in the form of some sort of ethical, some sort of expression of ethical beliefs, I guess. Yeah. like strong beliefs in particular ethical systems, or not necessarily ethical systems like defined systems. It could just be strong beliefs in what's right and wrong in a particular situation. I'm defining that too as ethical behavior, ethical beliefs. So you see a lot of that in the sevens, and then you will see that control freak behavior, like telling you how to drive, especially from someone that is, has anxiety as a type, especially a type 7 with anxiety. You're going to see a lot more of them telling you how to drive. Yeah. And that's going to be how their anxiety manifests, rather than, say, planning, right? Turning up early. Someone, I know the other day, someone was talking about how they hired a car and they took their out of the glove box. They put some things in the glove box and then they took it out really early and put it on the seat because they were afraid they were going to forget it. That was kind of more like planning anxiety, rather than, and that person that did that wasn't telling me how to drive. That was a different form of anxiety. And yeah, things like the checking, which I talked about, and there's other forms of anxiety, but particularly the control freak anxiety is a certain type of control freak anxiety, and telling you how to drive is a certain example of that. And that's related to being self-righteous, or easily falling into self-righteousness is probably, having a neurological system and then what's the word? Anyway, having a nervous, that's the word, having a nervous system with a lot of pathways that head to self-righteousness. So they go into self-righteousness a lot, the 7, and they will exhibit that form of control freakness, which is demonstrated, which is control freakness, which is influenced by self-righteousness, because of the self-righteousness makes them less sensitive to, are they overriding someone? They don't care much about, are they overriding someone? They don't notice, are they overriding someone? Are they superseding someone? They just do that because they're so self-righteous. Yeah. So I feel like maybe I should leave the video there. That's quite a lot to take in. Yeah. Anyway, thanks. Oh, I should say the date. It's the 29th of August, 2023.